I used to come here a lot when I was a kid. I don't go to church anymore, though. I still read the Bible. Got this beautiful family Bible. I'm rather proud of it. It's got lists of my ancestors going back over hundreds of years. They've written their name in it. Look at this. Samuel Thomas, one of them was called. This book, in the year of 1746, my mother gave me this Bible. In fact, Samuel Thomas and his ancestors are all listed in the front of the book, going right back to 1690, when they were married, when their children were born, when they were baptized, when their children died too a lot of the time. It's the whole history of my family put in their most important book. This Bible was actually printed in the same century as the Great English Bible, the King James Bible, the Bible where God is called Jehovah. And that's this Bible. Think of that. My family, they've been reading and listening to this Bible for hundreds and hundreds of years. Apart from its moral message, its very words must have seeped into them as they've seeped right through the English language. And of course, centuries before King James's Bible, Europe was using this book almost as its sanction, as the thing that gave order to the world and power to kings. It's the book of Christendom, the single book of Christendom. And it goes much further than that. It's not just the history of my family and what Europe's done with it, but this book reaches right back to the beginning of civilization, to the ancient Near East, where the oldest Bible stories took place. So that's the Bible story then. It goes from the most ancient world right up to modern Europe. Let's start, like you would with most good books, let's start at the beginning. First great lines of the Bible. Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And in the next 7 days, Jehovah, we are told, creates the earth and everything in it. Well, is that literally true? I mean, was there somebody who knew that and then wrote that down in the Bible? Is it history? How do we take that? Well, when my ancestors were writing their names in this Bible in the 17th century, they had absolutely no doubt that that word was literally true and the word of God. There was an archbishop of that time who worked out, by chasing back the generations from Jesus right back to Adam, that the world had actually started in the year 4004 BC on the 13th of July on a Sunday night. Actually, that made chaos starting on a Saturday evening before, so that seemed pretty good to the 17th century. But I don't think really it seems very good to us anymore. I mean, even Bible scholars would point out that there's gaps in the generation from Jesus back to Adam, whether you believe in him or not. So we actually have to look at Genesis in a slightly different way to see what's going on, to see where those Bible beginnings are. Now, think of the landscape that Jehovah's creating in Genesis. He's creating a landscape where there are shepherds, men like Abraham, where there are sheep and rivers and cities, and you go on great long journeys and you're a nomad and all this sort of a thing. He's creating the world of the ancient Near East, just like the book of Genesis tells us. That's the world in which the Bible was born.
And Terah took Abraham his son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran, and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran.
Abraham's travels are a key to understanding the beginnings of the Bible. Just as the book of Genesis takes you on a grand tour of the ancient East, from the Garden of Eden, past the Tower of Babel, down into Pharaoh's Egypt, so Abraham's wanderings follow exactly the same route, past all the wonder and wisdom of the ancient world. The book of Genesis is filled with clues to tell us where and when this all took place. Abraham, it tells us, lived at Haran before he started his long trek south. Today, Haran is a well-known archaeological site in southeast Turkey. with a village lived in by nomads who settled down. Families, in fact, a bit like Abraham's. The name Haran means crossroads. Haran stood, if you like, at the heart of the ancient world, at Piccadilly Circus. Look, 1,000 miles over there is the Persian Gulf. The two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates that drain into it, run up there somewhere and end up not too far away over there. Now, of course, all down the sides of those rivers are the greatest cities of the ancient world, the cities of Mesopotamia, the land of Sumer. The Bible calls it the land of Shinar. Over there is where Abraham's going to next, Canaan, Syria, and then down into Egypt. They're rough little places, though, Syria and Canaan at this time. Little sort of mountain towns, getting most of their culture from Mesopotamia. Egypt, of course, is a land on its own, doing its own thing quite happily. So you can see that when Abraham and his family and his herds were travelling, they weren't just wandering around aimlessly in the desert talking to God. He was going down the ancient M1. He was travelling the whole arc of the Fertile Crescent, and it was a great trading route. You see, you went in boats mostly, but sometimes with donkeys along the rivers, and then you came round here and you went down into Canaan with your donkeys. You didn't go through the middle because there was a desert, and you and your donkeys would have died of thirst. Now, this is an interesting thing. Camels, which could cross that desert, because they can go without water for about 3 days, came in about 600 BC. So those stories that describe Abraham riding a camel must have been made about that time. The phrase Ur of the Chaldees, too. It's an interesting phrase because the word Chaldea is a word for Mesopotamia over there, and that didn't come in till about 600 BC either. So it looks like those stories, at least in Abraham, date from around that time. But there are many other stories to do with Abraham which show that that sort of lifestyle is thousands of years older than that. Archaeologists have been coming up with evidence of Abraham for years. But you can't always trust them. Just because you dig up a place called Haran doesn't mean you dug up Abraham's house. And there's still no real evidence that the people in the book of Genesis ever lived at all. What archaeologists have given us, though, is an amazing amount of evidence about Abraham's ancient world, of ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia and all the rest. And that you can find at sites like Haran. We know an incredible amount about Mesopotamian civilization, largely because we've been digging it up for 150 years. But you know, at the end of the day, when you've found all the splendid palaces and the heaps of gold and the great statues and all the rest of it, the thing that really tells you is the writing. Especially with Mesopotamia, because they lived in mud houses and they've all gone. Their writing survives. They invented writing. They wrote on tablets of clay like this one, polished up the surface with a beautiful shine. They got little wedge-shaped stick, and with that, they impressed little patterns. Now, these patterns had started off as pictures, but they ended up as completely abstract signs called cuneiform. And they stamped out all their little words in rows in such a successful system that it went straight round the Fertile Crescent. It went from deep in Mesopotamia, right through here, through Haran, right down. You can find it in the state archives of Egypt. And of course, if you invent a system of writing, even though it's taken up by dozens of languages, the style of your writing stays with you. So the Mesopotamian legal system, the legal contracts, became the legal norm for the whole of the ancient world. So Mesopotamian science and dating and all that, Mesopotamian culture came out of Mesopotamia, just like Abraham, on tablets like this. This actually is quite an interesting one. It's actually a land grant. It's a business contract. It tells you that Joe now owns his plot of land and he's bought it from Fred for so much money. Well, that's rather interesting because there's a passage in the book of Genesis where Abraham is buying a plot of land. Now, archaeologists dig those land grant tablets up by the city gates usually because that's where the documents were made out and the announcements, the public announcements of the change of property took place. And that's exactly what you find in the book of Genesis. But how vivid it is in Genesis. It tells you about Abraham, the man, buying the land in which he's going to bury his wife. And it's a lovely little story. This, of course, the Mesopotamian version is a very dry legal document, but they amount to the same thing. And if you look in those tablets, you'll find dozens of biblical customs. That lovely custom that Abraham and his family had of swearing oaths by putting their hand under their thigh. That's on these tablets too. Just as Isaac's dying words are taken as a written will in the Bible, so a man's dying words are taken as a written will in these Mesopotamian tablets when you read about the law courts and things like that. This is actually a list of Mesopotamian laws made about 1760 BC, and they're written out in just the same way as the list of Jehovah's laws in the Old Testament. And there's a Mesopotamian king receiving his laws from a god at the top of a mountain in just the same way that Moses received the 10 Commandments from his God on top of his holy mountain in the wilderness of Sinai. You know, great numbers of those Mesopotamian tablets are actually dated. The scholars have spent many, many years trying to fix Abraham and all his family into our modern history. Well, at present, those tablets, those old Mesopotamian tablets that deal with Abraham and his sort of lifestyle, date between 2500 BC and 500 BC. You can't really get much tighter than that. Perhaps they're older, who knows? But why is there this terrific obsession to put people like Abraham into our history? Remember, biblical history isn't like that. That deals in generations. You go from Adam to Jesus, and it's to do with a family. But we want dates. Why do we want dates? I think some people think that if I could march up here and tell you Abraham lived in such and such a year, that would actually prove the existence of God. Think so? Or perhaps there are other people who actually think that it would be nice to believe that there was really a time on earth when there were people like Abraham, people that founded nations and talked to God when the world was a purer place. Of course, in most other religions, Abraham would